and I used to spend about a week a month there, about a week every 2 months now in Mexico. I know most of the marina managers, and we talk about this on a basis every time we're together because it's ever changing down there. A few years ago, the Navy took over the port captains' jobs down there, and the port captains made things a little bit more difficult for the Navy to do it, and then all these new protocols came in, and standardization in Mexico has never been great, and it's still a little, there's some gray areas, but what they want, and the closer you get to that, the better off you're going to be, because as time has been going on at a fairly rapid rate, these are becoming requirements that are actually needed. And one of the big questions I get about cruising to Mexico is it safe? Well, I don't know, is everybody here from Seattle just about?
No.
Okay.
Colorado.
Okay. It's safer in Seattle. So this is a map of where piracy and violent crimes on the ocean have happened. And I uploaded this morning. This is recent data. You notice there's only one mark right here in Mexico, and it's on the east coast of Mexico. Now, this is a thing it tells, if you look at the top, it's attempted attacks, boarded, fired upon, hijacked, and whatnot. So there was an attempted attack on the east coast of Mexico, and as far as I went back, going back 4 years, this is still the only one. And when you go into the details of it, it was some 5 people in a fishing boat with a gun came up to board a boat, saw armed guard, and then left. So there was no incident, but it was reported to a harbor master. So that, as far as piracy and boating, it's incredibly safe in Mexico. I would say the same precautions you take in Mexico, you need to take in San Diego or San Francisco on your way down. Dinghies get stolen, outboard motors get stolen, but it happens on a daily basis in these cities. And when you're in areas that are populated with poor people, chances are it's going to happen. So just use the same precautions you would use here at Social Bay or anywhere else. So it's not on the piracy watch list at this time. They post this, you can go on, I don't actually remember the name of the website, but it doesn't take much of a Google search to find this information, and it's updated every few months, and they will, if there was a rash of problems, that area would be targeted and it'd be on this bulletin that comes out. They talk about some resolved accounts in the far south of Mexico on the Guatemalan border, but that's mostly items like dinghies being stolen and things like that. And when you look at the overall crime rate, Mexico leads in some, but U.S. crushes it in most. So when you ask if it's safe to go to Mexico, it's completely safe to go to Mexico. So you'll hear a lot of people over the years talk about getting boarded by Mexican officials and like how scary that situation could be. Now, I've been racing down there and cruising down there for years, over 2 decades. It's never happened. I've never seen it. I've never seen a personal account of it. I read a write-up of it about 18 years ago or about then, and it was just like getting boarded by the U.S. Coast Guard. When you come into San Diego, your last port of call before going to Mexico, if you came in at night, there's a high probability you're going to get boarded by the U.S. Coast Guard. I've been boarded on a whaler coming back from a surf trip by the U.S. Coast Guard in San Diego. It's just a safety protocol. They're just there to make sure that you are going where you say you're going, that you're not smuggling people and or goods back and forth. Same thing the U.S. Coast Guard is doing. It's no bigger deal. And there's much less of them than there are U.S. Coast Guards. The chance of being boarded is next to none. So, real worries in Mexico. Battery life, the charging of your batteries, the sun. I joke that everybody from up here races to get to the sun, and when they get to the sun, they're looking for shade the rest of the time. It's hot, it's sunny, and it's every single day, and with the water reflection, you need to have ways to stay cool. Paperwork is probably the biggest fear in Mexico because they love paperwork. I don't know what they do with it all once it's filled out, but they take it, they actually do look at it. They will catch any errors in the paperwork, but they have tons of paperwork, and you have to be super patient with them when you're dealing with it, because that's their job. They've gone through this hundreds and hundreds of times, and you got to think if it was a Mexican boat coming to the U.S., it'd be similar type of situations. So now if you don't go down with the Baja Haha or the Cubar or one of those rallies, your first stop is most likely going to be Ensenada, because in theory you're supposed to clear into the country before you make stops in any other spot. Now the Haha for years has stopped in 2 spots and then cleared in Cabo. And that has been a gray area, and it's becoming a black and white area now. And so we're making adjustments to the Baja Haha to address that issue right now, and that may actually mean that we start in Ensenada, and we will work on that as it gets closer. So when you're down there, Baja Naval and the Marina Corral, actually I just wrote Baja Naval, are the easiest. Those 2 are the most organized as far as getting you to and from and getting all your paperwork out. There's also another marina there that will help you. The marina managers are well versed in what it takes to get in and out of the country. They want you to help you do it. So they will help you with the whole thing. They put together all the documents, and sometimes they're right and they go and they fill out, and if there's an error they have to go back to the office, fill out the documents, and go back and forth. And I've been on both sides of that. It's a lot of paperwork and it takes a little bit of time, but it's something you have to do to go into their country, right? So you can also check into Cabo, Puerto Vallarta, Mazatlan, La Paz, and Acapulco. I don't recommend your first port of call being in Puerto Vallarta. They're really set up for cruise ships. The only time I checked in there as a first port of call, it was a very difficult process. They weren't set up for small recreational vessels, and I think I got asked if somebody died on the boat 6 times before we were done, over 18 hours of going through, people coming down to the boat. It was a much bigger deal, but I've gone through it all the other places, and it's been a much easier process. So you still have to check in and check out of every port after you've checked into the country. Sometimes it's just a matter of notifying the port captain that you're leaving and the new port captain when you're coming. You used to have paperwork, and the new port captain would ask for the paperwork from the last port. That's going away, but they still require to notify you. And if you leave your slip, if you have a slip there for say a month and you leave your slip for 5 or 6 days, when you come back in, you have to show most of your documentation. They don't necessarily keep it and do it, but someone's going to meet you at the dock. They're going to fill out paperwork, and it's going to be like they never met you before. It's kind of an odd situation, but when we came back into Puerto Vallarta after being gone for 5 days, they came in and they had to check the whole ID number against the paperwork that it was the same boat. These are all laws that were put into place for different reasons, and they don't ever go away. They just add new ones, right? So that's part of going to Mexico. International check-in requirements, the things that you're going to need on your boat. This is a list that we just compiled for one of the races going down in Cabo. And when I did the Haha last year, a new regulation came in, and that's on this list. So you need current vessel registration. You need proof of insurance. Despite what you have maybe heard, you need insurance in Mexico. Last port of clearance, if it's a USA registered boat, you can just say San Diego or the last thing. But if you have a boat that's registered like in Malta and you're coming out of the US and going down into Mexico, you have to have an exit paperwork from the US for your entry paperwork into Mexico. You need a crew and guest list. They call it a manifest of everybody that's on there, their nationality, their passports, and have that all set up before you get there. This is sort of the new thing, is you need a captain's license or something there of similar type of regulation to go in now. A boater's card from Washington State, a boater's card from California, U.S. sailing certificate. those type of things will work. And when we checked in on the Haha, they wanted as many of the crew as possible to have them as well. They asked that every crew had it, and they realized when I was on a boat with 12 that not everyone was going to have one. But a number of us had some sort of documentation. And so that's sort of a new thing. And we've never been asked that. I wasn't asked that in March when I sailed down, but I was asked that in October when I sailed down. So it's going more standardization for that being asked. Valid navigational license for the crew, boater's card, safety at sea, or seafarers, or any of those others work. They don't have a system for cross-referencing what certificate goes to what. They want the same regulations that we have here down there. Now, in Washington, I don't remember what the minimum age is that people have to have voters' cards, but in California, it's like anybody under 30 years old now. Mexico wants that same thing. They don't necessarily know what all those regulations are, but they want to see some sort of documentation that matches that. If you're not the boat owner, you need a notarized captain appointment letter or maritime authority that you're taking a boat down. Like when I sail a boat down, I'm very rarely the owner of the boat. So I have to have a notarized letter saying that I am the appointed captain. And this is not just for immigrations, but it's for every marina you're going to go to. Full passport copies and a copy of your 10-year Mexican import permit, what we call a tip. And does anybody here know what a tip is? This is going to be something we're going to talk about in just a minute. So you need a detailed list of the food on board and the agricultural products, and you need to keep your garbage on board. They want to see garbage. They don't want to know that you didn't dump it all out as you were coming in there. If you're coming from somewhere other than the U.S., they want to know your last 5 ports. In which, if you're left here, you could write Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, even if you're coming from the U.S. And like I said, they may not ask for this, but this is what they actually, in their documents, they require. So having it helps you get through at a faster pace. And you need the bill of sale of your boat, a copy of the bill of sale of your boat. So have all documents on a PDF format. They won't accept photographs. If you don't know yet, the Note app on your iPhone has a scanning capability to do PDFs, so you can do PDFs of everything. And it's good to have a thumb drive with all that stuff on it, and I recommend having color copies of all this stuff so that you can hand it over to them, because they're going to make copies of it. Some places are going to charge you for that, some places are just going to do it. Like Marina Corral just does it, and but I don't know about Baja Naval or any of those right now. Agricultural department, when you get in there, they now come on your boat, which is, for years we used to go to Mexico. If we came in after 5, we went out on the town, and one person came back and did all the clearance the next day. That's changed. It's getting a little bit more like the U.S. They want you to stay on the boat. They want to check the agricultural, check the garbage, and they haven't charged us yet as far as when I've gone down, but they want to weigh the garbage, and there's a per pound fee for, I don't know what they actually do with it. They burn it, I assume. But they want a per pound fee to take care of that. And that's generally organic garbage. Now, you know that when you're 5, 10, 15 miles out, you can dump organic garbage. So you want to show some garbage when you come in, but you don't necessarily have to have the organic garbage on the boat. They want a declaration that there's no plants or animals on board, and that's signed by the captain or the person in charge. And we also, I also recommend that you only bring the food necessary. Food is cheaper and better in Mexico, so it doesn't make sense to do a huge Costco run in San Diego before you leave. You're going to have to get rid of a bunch of that anyway. Not canned goods, but anything that's not cooked, produce and meats and vegetables and stuff, you're going to end up having to get out. And when they charge this per pound fee, you're going to be paying per pound to get rid of that. So the tip, the thing I mentioned earlier, the temporary import permit, is for vehicles and boats in coming into Mexico, and it's a great system. They have a huge luxury tax in Mexico. So if you were bringing your boat in, rather than you paying 25% the value of the boat and paying the government for it, they have this temporary import permit, and I believe it's like $50, and it's good for 10 years. And that just means you're not selling the boat in Mexico. You have a port that in the US and or somewhere else that you're going or you're passing through, but every 10 years, and you can renew it. You don't have to, it's 10 years and it's renewable. So not having the tip is a bad thing. It's completely required by the immigrations when you come in, and it's required by every marina. And marinas are required down there to enforce this. And if you don't have it, they can seize your boat. And for $50, it's not worth that problem. And if your boat has been to Mexico before you bought it, there's a possibility a tip exists on your boat. Now, an expired tip is not a canceled tip. You have to have your tip canceled and then get a new one, and the previous owner of the boat has to do that. And if you can't get a hold of the previous owner, I recommend you talk to one of the Mexican marina people like Fido down at Marina Corral. He can walk you through the process of how to get the tip removed so that you can get a current tip. Yeah, if your boat's never been to Mexico, it's an online system, and it's actually, as of the last year, that's a fairly clean system to do. If you can't get it to work online, or you have a tip that has to get canceled and you have to do it, when you're in San Diego, you're going to have to make a trip to Mexico and go to a Banecito, which is a Mexican national bank, and get that all handled. Which is a little bit of a pain in the neck. It's not impossible, but it's really important to know whether your boat's ever been to Mexico before you bought it. Like I said, marinas are going to require a copy of all this stuff. Your file in a marina is going to be an inch thick. It's going to be like my human resources file when I used to work for somebody. It's going to be really, really thick. So charts that are good to use in Mexico is paper charts. Charlie charts is what I recommend. Electronic maps. Now, I've noticed that Navionics used to have the error, and now they're quite accurate. But just last month, I did a race from San Diego to just north of Ensenada around a rock, and the sea maps, the rock was a half mile away from where it was supposed to be on the chart. So obviously, know where you are on your lat long, and double check it if it's a place you've never been before, if you're slightly unfamiliar, or if you see any abnormalities in your charts, realize that you should probably download a second electronic chart version and compare them. Years ago, they used to all be kind of screwed up. They've fixed them, but I was really surprised to find that rock, it wasn't in a bay you're going to go into anchor, so it's not like on a place where you're going to go. We rounded in a race, but we were already turning around the rock, and the guy saying, we still have a half mile to go, and I'm like, no, the rock's right here. It's 6 feet off my left side, you know. And so he comes up and goes, well, I guess the sea maps are a little off. So that was an error I just found. So I don't know if I don't use sea map that often. I use Navionics most of the time. And I've not had problems with Navionics, at least down into the Acapulco area. So when you have a dinghy, oh, go ahead. Question?
Do you use CPN?
The question was, do you use have I used OpenCPN? I've only used it in clone with another thing just to see if I liked it. The Navionics for me was a little easier to use because I'd been using it, but the maps matched at that time. And that was racing to Puerto Vallarta, and we used that. So now if you're going down there and you're from like Inner Puget Sound or something, the thing that's going to be different is your dinghy. You can't have a bad or slow dinghy and cruise Mexico. First of all, marinas are full down there right now. It's a big issue. If you're planning to go down there next fall, talk to the marinas now, because I just was down there. Everybody says they're at over 100% capacity. So chances are you're going to be anchoring and using your dinghy. Your dinghy is your life support, really. You need a hard bottom dinghy that you can beach. You need a motor that can outrun the swell. So it doesn't seem like a big deal, but 8 inches of water can roll over a dinghy. One of the guys who works for me is down at our Ullman sales booth down here, went on a 2-week or 3-week cruise throughout the Sea of Cortez, and they were fighting at the end of the cruise to make it a 50% success rate of getting to shore without rolling over their dinghy. And these are experienced people. It's just, they said it took like 4 inches of a wake, and when it gets in that shallow water, you get out, you stop, and that thing flips over, knocks you over, takes you out. Everybody, they were always bruised up. They go out to dinner, their clothes are soaking wet. They just said it's impossible without a hard bottom dinghy that you can get in and get off the beach fast. So you also want a way to lock your boat and your motor to your boat, and that goes for pretty much anything south. If you're, it probably goes for here, but it just goes for anything south of here. It's just we've seen in Turtle Bay dinghies and motors get stolen. We've seen it in Puerto Vallarta. We've seen it in Mazatlan, but we see it in San Diego, and we've seen it in Newport Beach, and we've seen it's just. Dinghies are valuable. There's kids out there that'll steal a dinghy, and they're easy to get rid of and not that traceable. So have a good system for locking your dinghy, or just pull it out of the water and lock it to your boat. It's much harder for them to take if it's out of the water. Water and food, there's lots of it in Mexico. It's all good. It's not like you need to stock up. Matter of fact, in the last 5 years, even the favorite American things that you think you can't get in Mexico, you can get. You're gonna have a hard time finding something that you want really bad that you can't get in Mexico, especially when you get to the bigger stores like Megas and La Comars and Chadrois. They're big mega grocery stores. You can buy washer and dryers in these places. They're big industrial stores. And they have Costco down there. If you feel the need to have 800 pounds worth of cereal, you can get it down there. Anywhere there are people, you're going to find food and water. Almost everybody has some sort of RO system for purifying their water, and they all have great food. Seasons. Now the hurricane season is officially May 15th through November 30th. Some insurance companies, or a lot of insurance companies, allow you to head south on November 1st, hence why the Baja takes off then. There's a zone, I don't know, Craig, you could probably answer. What is the latitude you need to be north of during hurricane season, 21?
Well, it depends on the company, but 27 degrees up by San Carlos.
Yeah.
If you can get up there, that's good.
Yeah, so there are hurricane holes that are in the hurricane zone that some insurance companies allow you to stay at, and there's been very little damage, and like San Carlos is well above the hurricane zone, but Puerto Vallarta and the 3 marinas in Puerto Vallarta obviously have hurricane holes, but the further in you go, the better, like Marina Vallarta or Paradise and deep into Paradise. Those marinas have been really protected out of all the hurricanes that have come through in the last few years. Puerto Escondido is way north in the Sea of Cortez. Puerto Escondido is not a place that you want to hang out and vacation. It's a very industrial place, but if you lived in Arizona or Colorado, it's a much shorter drive to there, so you can haul your boat out, keep it on the hard during hurricane season and get to and from your boat pretty easy. But it's not like a place, it's not really a vacation spot, I guess is the best way to put that. So getting down there as you start your trip, obviously San Diego is going to be your last spot to get big equipment things done. Now, lots of things are cheap in Mexico, but things that are not made in Mexico are not cheap in Mexico. So water makers and charging systems and starters and alternators are cheaper in the United States than you're going to find in Mexico. So if you're going to do that kind of work, you want to do that before you head south.
Ascension, creator and co-host of Discovery Channel's
The Ensenada, it's only 7 to 12 hours south of San Diego. It's just a day sail. If you leave in the morning, you'll motor till 11 and you'll sail and you'll get there at sunset. It's not a far trip. It's a super easy trip. It's generally not rough. The weather predictions there are good for solid 3 days, very accurate down to the hour. It's easy to get there, and it has 3 marinas that are all good marinas, depending on the draft of your boat. If you're really deep, you have to go to Marina Corral. And Marina Corral is probably one of the best marinas. And then you have Baja Naval and Cruiseport. There is no real anchorage in Ensenada anymore. We used to anchor inside behind the jetty, but now the cruise ships come in there and you can't anchor in there. So there's no safe anchorage and there's no real anchorage. There's probably a couple places you could anchor for a while. I'd never leave my boat unattended. There's a lot of surge. And so you call ahead, getting in there. There's usually space at Marina Corral, and it's a great place to check in and check out. They have a free van. It's easy to get around. The grocery store's right across the street. It's about 5 miles less into the bay, so when you want to exit, get back out, you're saving over an hour round trip. There's the next stop, really, you can actually stop every night if you want. There's small little bays, but the next general stop down the way is Bahia Tortuga, which is right at the hook right here on the Baja Peninsula, right behind Cedros Island. And that spot is it's the only spot on the outside where you can get fuel south of Ensenada. So you can get fuel. You can get water. There's a little grocery store. There's a little paved street. The grocery store there is actually kind of real. You can get welding done there. You can anchor 300 boats in the bay. The bay is almost completely enclosed. It's got a narrow entrance, so you're never crowded. When the Baja goes down, there's 200 boats anchored in there, and we take up about 10% of the bay. So it's a huge bay.